Hello and welcome to another live stream from Smaulgld. Today we're going to be talking about, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme and or a fraud, and taking your thoughts on that. Also, we're going to cover the week in review, in case you missed it, top gold and silver stories for the weekend of June 10th is out. There's plenty of headlines there to dig into, and that podcast does that. You can get some of your thoughts on that as well. Excuse me, we're talking about tariffs, the Inspector General report coming out, the Singapore conference, which is coming out. Also, comments by John McCain saying that a majority of Americans support globalization. And that was a message to our allies that he and the Americans, a majority of us, support what they're doing and they do not support the president. So plenty to talk about there as well. Now, on the Smaulgld side, you are listening now to a new microphone, and you don't hear the squeaky chair. So this microphone takes away a lot of the snap, crackle, and pop. Sometimes it sounds like I'm smacking my lips. A lot of that isn't really what's going on. It's just the way the microphone picks up the ambient sounds. So I hope you like it. Let me know in the comments if you hear me and what the sound quality is like at the moment. All right, well, let's get into the topic. I don't think it is. It's been a bit hard today. Oh, yes, Jeffrey, we're going to talk about, I'm glad you can hear me. We're going to talk about Bitcoin as a Ponzi scheme and or fraud. Now, I don't believe that they are, and I think people throw around terms. They don't like something, so they call it something. But I think if you're not going to like Bitcoin, you can not like it for real reasons, not reasons that are not true. Thanks, Rod. Okay, so a Ponzi scheme requires new capital to come in order to pay out old capital. That's how I look at it as a Ponzi scheme. But Social Security is probably a large Ponzi scheme. The only way they can pay out is if more people, younger people, come in a pyramid, and it's also called a pyramid scheme, where there's enough young people supporting the old people, so they put their money in, and then the money goes out to the old people. And then it carries on, and they continually hope that there's more young people making more money paying taxes into the system than there are old people. There's none of that in Bitcoin. I've heard people say, well, it requires people to keep buying it, and if people stop buying it, then the whole Ponzi scheme collapses. But that's true with any asset. If people stop buying gold or stocks or bonds, there would be no demand for them. That doesn't make them, therefore, anything that loses demand. A Ponzi scheme, as you mentioned, a Ponzi scheme requires there to be new capital, not new buying or new interest in the asset, but there needs to be new capital in order for it to exist. Bitcoin doesn't require new capital in order to exist. It does require some inputs. It does require mining. It does require a trading system, and the blockchain has to work. But that doesn't make it a Ponzi scheme. Now, as to it being a fraud, I don't know what that means. A fraud, it doesn't fit the definition of fraud at all. A fraud is something that isn't what it says it is, and that people make money off of that by presenting something that isn't true. So, for example, I start a company, I don't know, Smaulgld bagels. And I decide that I'm going to make bagels. I have no idea how to make bagels. I make a few of them. I sell them. But my accountant says that I sell 1,000 a week. And next week, and then after a couple of months, my accountant says I make 10,000 a week. And then I'm raising prices. And that this company, Smaulgld's Bagels, is doing so well that he's going to issue shares, or he's going to do an ICO, initial coin offering, based on the stacking error we're going to get to in a second. Based on the sales of Smaulgld bagels. Well, if I don't sell that many bagels, and now I'm selling a security or a crypto coin saying that you're going to get the benefits of the profits of my bagel selling, and there isn't any bagel selling, that's a fraud, plain and simple. But the idea of Bitcoin itself is not a fraud because you may not like what it is. And there's a lot not to like. There's a lot to like, but there is no Bitcoin person who's telling you it's anything, and it is what it is. It's not committing any fraud. And you could say, well, someone might try to sell it to you and tell you it does certain things or certain things are going to happen. That makes the person who's telling you that, if they're telling you something fraudulent or not true about Bitcoin, fraudulent. But that doesn't make Bitcoin fraudulent because the white paper is the white paper, and that's what Bitcoin is. And you can assign little or no value to it, or you can assign whatever value you want to it, but there is no fraud. Now, almost ICOs or Ponzi schemes are a scam. That is correct. There is a difference between Ponzi scheme ICOs or fraudulent ICOs and Bitcoin. An ICO is more akin to Smaulgld's fake bagel scheme. I don't know how to make bagels. And so what I do is I convince people that I'm the bagel king and that I'm going to sell more bagels than anyone, and you guys are going to make a lot of money off of my efforts. And your coins are going to skyrocket. You're going to go to the moon. You're going to get Lambos. That is fraudulent. That type of ICO is 100% fraudulent. Bitcoin doesn't promise anything. There's no income. There's no person running it. There's no one benefiting from the price rising other than the holders. Now, take over to Stacking Nerds' point. There are Ponzi schemes, yes, targeting people, not necessarily to get into Bitcoin, but there are promoters. And you could say, like in stocks, when a major stockholder does a pump and dump, they actually, in stock land, owe a fiduciary duty to others. So let's say I own half the Bitcoin in the world, and I'm always out there touting it and pumping it and going on CNBC. That makes what I do fraudulent. That doesn't make Bitcoin fraudulent. That makes the holder of the Bitcoin is doing something fraudulent. So yes, there's a huge difference between an ICO and Bitcoin. And an ICO is really more akin to a security. And I think people confuse the two. And the problem with an ICO is if you're expected to benefit from the efforts of whoever's running the ICO, the DAO, you really need to treat that as if it is a security. And that's the other problem with ICOs. Most of them are fraudulently issued. They're issued in a way so they try to say they're not securities, which means they actually tell you you don't even get anything if this company or DAO does well. You're just buying it just because. So I would say that is fraudulent, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily a Ponzi scheme, but there's definitely an element of fraud in many ICOs. And altcoins are scams since they have worse software security than Bitcoin, and they claim they are better. Yes, when you have a altcoin and you have basically an issuer, so let's say Jeffrey and I get together and we decide we're going to make Smaulgld coin, we're going to pull down we're going to base it on Bitcoin, and we control it, we issue it, we pre-mine it. Well, that's a lot different than Bitcoin, because now what we're doing is we are coming up with a scheme, and it's designed to make us rich at your expense, because we're going to dump all of our Smaulgld coin on you. And that is a fraud. Again, a Ponzi scheme, though, is different because a Ponzi scheme means in order to pay out others, you need to bring in more money. When you say that people need to buy something to keep it going higher, that isn't the definition of a Ponzi scheme, because that could apply to any stock, bond, or asset. All right, Tom Manley, does master locks hold information and SN on their locks to keep track of what key fits what lock? I don't know. I know I've bought the master locks, and I mean, first of all, there's ways of breaking into those locks that you wouldn't even need the key or the combination. But that question I don't know. Jeffrey says, yes, and we're going to keep 20% and have much, yes. And okay, so what Jeffrey is saying, when you make those claims, when you make those statements, we're going to keep 20%, we're going to have faster block times, we're going to use less energy, and somehow that's all going to benefit to you, that could be fraud, because those statements, if we were issuing a security and we registered it with the SEC, we'd have to make statements about our coin, why we believe it to be better. And if they turn out to be false, and somebody makes a purchase of our Smaulgld coin on the basis of what we said or put in writing, they could sue us for fraud. But there is no fraud in Bitcoin. It's out there, and no one's controlling it. No one's owning it. At least we don't know that. And if you want to buy it, you can buy it. If anyone makes a representation to you that somehow they run Bitcoin, well, that's fraud because they don't. Sir, you're making too much sense. Great criticism analysis and thing. Well, thank you, M. Canning. That's what we're here for. I want to hear some comments on anyone think that. Give me an argument, write it out, send it to me an email that shows that Bitcoin is a fraud. Again, I think people don't like it, so they give it a name of something that they don't like, but it doesn't necessarily fit. Does Tesla keep codes for their locking system? I don't know, Tom. You're asking me a lot of questions about security. They're very good questions, but I don't know. One could argue Tesla is a fraud. I mean, well, maybe not, because, again, see, I don't like Tesla, so my first thought in my mind is, oh, it's a fraud. Well, it's not. If people are stupid enough to buy a stock in a company where the company makes no money, has a market cap that's so expensive that it's more than major automobile manufacturers, the car is unsafe, it's not necessarily a fraud as long as they tell you, everybody knows that that's what you're buying. You could say people who buy into Bitcoin, Tesla, or other assets, in your opinion, you could say they're stupid. But I wouldn't necessarily say that they're fraudulent. They keep your location data. Yeah, Ford does. Well, I know they also can track your conversations in these cars as well. At least that's one of the things they wanted to do. Anyone have any other thoughts on fraud and Bitcoin? You deactivate your car. They can also speed it up. Jeffrey's saying they can also deactivate your car. Wasn't there a guy who was on the wrong side of the FBI or the CIA, and he was driving down the road, and all of a sudden his car just accelerated, and he went smashing in. He was in Los Angeles into a fiery death. Not good. You think you can drive, but they have these self-driving cars. Now, tariffs. We are seeing with right now a huge showdown between the United States and the G7. Not so much China, but really among those countries. What happens when the energy cost to mine Bitcoin gets to a crazy stage? The green, yes, the stacking. I think that's what it was. There's always these strange deaths when someone has the goods or dirt on Hillary. What happens when the energy cost to mine Bitcoin gets to the crazy stage? The Green Brigade won't be happy. Yeah, that's definitely true. And a lot of Bitcoin mining does use a lot of electricity. And right now, electricity is very expensive in many areas. Now, in Venezuela, it's not because it's government subsidized, so there's a lot of Bitcoin mining there. I would say that's the biggest Achilles heel of Bitcoin is the expense and the power used in mining Bitcoin. Because if it's going to be widely used and you're going to have big, larger amounts of transactions, it's a global currency, the energy costs are going to go even higher. So there are cryptocurrencies that don't use energy in that way, but that may keep Bitcoin from becoming a very widely used currency. And it may turn out that either Bitcoin goes away or it becomes a digital store of value, and that it doesn't have the velocity, it doesn't trade that much, and other coins that learn to work on a different system, I don't know what that might be, would be transactional currencies. Because right now, if you have a digital US dollar or euro, it's not going to take a lot of energy because there's no confirmation that has to be done. The other issue everyone has to think about is quantum computing and how they can challenge Bitcoin and what can be done to prevent quantum computing from just wiping out the whole crypto. Yes, well, Bitcoin will encourage real renewable energy, but the question is, will renewable energy be powerful enough? I mean, who would have thought 20 years ago there'd even be a guy like Elon Musk selling these battery-powered cars? When I was a kid, you barely could get a Hot Wheel to go around the track a few times after you charge the battery. But maybe, it might not be solar. Who knows what it'll be? geothermal. I don't know, but you will need more energy, or you're going to have to figure out how to use less energy in Bitcoin mining. I see if you, that could be. M. Canning, it's not a fraud. Bitcoin is a trustless system. That's right. In fact, it's actually anti-fraud. I think people are confusing the fact of the price of Bitcoin. They just think, well, it's gone up that high. There's got to be some fraud in it. No, that's just what people want. The value of the market wants to ascribe to it. It has nothing to do with the underlying trustless system. It just, people bid it up. That's not fraudulent. That could be, you can call it bubble, you could call it mania, but there's no fraud there. Takes a lot of energy to run the miner, keep the machines cool. Now, that's correct. Fusion power will be almost limited. Yeah, well, if that's the case, then cost of mining goes down, and then does the price of Bitcoin stay higher? Let's say the cost of mining Bitcoin it's close to zero. Is there still value in Bitcoin? It's interesting because Bitcoin isn't valued because it uses electricity. It's part of the justification. It uses thousands of dollars to produce one. That's used to justify the price, but I don't think that's what gives it value. The fact that somebody, in a sense, wasted all that electricity to come up with the Bitcoin. Who knows? Also, the Bitcoin Lightning Network, that's true, does not need mining. So you put things off-chain and you set up the nodes, and that's a very good point. In the current circumstance, it does, but if you put them off and then you record the transaction later, then you're not dealing with an energy issue whatsoever. And also, they're going to run out of Bitcoin. They're going to finish mining them relatively soon. Same with Litecoin. There's a limited issuance on all those. So the idea is to use Lightning networks for small transactions. That is correct. Now, I don't know if you've seen the Smaulgld Week in Review, but there was something that was quite disturbing. I saw that John McCain put a tweet out. As you know, he's been really annoyed with Donald Trump ever since Donald Trump said he wasn't a hero, and said the reason he wasn't a hero was because all he did was get captured, and he doesn't want his heroes captured. Well, John McCain has been on a rant against Donald Trump ever since, but his latest one is he sent out a tweet to our allies, and I'll read it to you. It's quite remarkable that he says this. To our allies. And he speaks for our allies. He's got a strange sense of his importance. Bipartisan majorities of Americans remain pro-free trade, pro-globalization, and supportive of alliances based on 70 years of shared values. Americans stand with you. This is to our allies, even if our president doesn't. Now, what do you think of that? I mean, for John McCain to come out and purposely undermine the president, purposely undermine a fellow Republican, and tell the allies, this is fraud. I don't think vast majority of Americans support globalization. So I did a poll on Twitter. In my poll, I think, let's see how many votes we got so far here. I asked, now, of course, the Smaulgld followers are probably not going to go in a majority for pro-globalization, but 46 votes I got so far. And it says, John McCain said, partisan majorities of Americans remain pro-globalization. Remain, as if they always were pro-globalization. And I asked, as an American, do you remain pro-globalization? And guess what the numbers turned out to be? You want to guess? Taking guesses. Did a majority of Smaulgld followers on Twitter think that we stand with our allies on pro-globalization, even if our president doesn't? You don't want to guess? You win a prize. All right, no one's guessing. 15% in favor. I think you would win the prize. Let me see. 13%. Yes. Out of 46 votes, 87% say no, we are not pro-globalization, and only 13% yes. And probably there aren't Smaulgld followers. Probably someone saw it. They just managed to get their vote in. Well, that's it for 2% pro. No, all is one anti-globalist. He is deep state, deep throat. He really, it's interesting. I used to be on the fence about whether Donald Trump was part of the whole establishment. I listened to all different theories, but I've come to the point of view that he definitely isn't. There is just too much hysteria around anything he does, and he clearly is doing things that are not pro-globalist. I mean, what he did, we're just going to mention the tariffs. He basically, I mean, Justin Trudeau is a complete moron, and it's obvious. And he is a virtue signaler. He says he wants all boys to grow up as feminists, and you got to teach that, and people power, and just an unbelievable disgrace. And he doesn't really even know what he's doing. And he went to India and he was dancing, and he was dressed. He dressed his family in Indian costumes. I mean, are you going to go to Canada dressed as a Canadian Mountie? You get off the plane? That's how foolish this guy is. But anyway, Trump ripped into Trudeau, called him all types of names. Basically said, he talks a big game when he's not talking in front of me. And you're seeing in the press, like Bloomberg saying, Trudeau's had enough. He's had enough. What is he going to do? So what I'm saying about Trump is that he really seems to be rattling cages. He doesn't seem to be interested in NAFTA and all the current tariffs. He doesn't seem to be interested in promoting Chinese production so they can send us cheap goods. He definitely seems to be in favor of what's right for America, and that's long been gone because the last two presidents, Bush and Obama and Clinton, they were all in favor of these global deals, and that America had to take a back seat or at least step back and let the rest of the world develop, and Trump's having none of that, and I think that is why they are against him. It seems to be there's just too much hysteria around him with the Mueller investigation and Comey with the book and Brennan and Clapper. It's too much to be some kind of facade that actually he's part of them and they're just pretending to go against him. I don't think that's the yeah. People kind, Nick. That was the thing that he said. Yeah, he's way out offline. He's not even I don't know. Tricky guy. Good to see you here. Again, we're not even talking about gold or silver or collapses and silver skyrocketing and people waking up and running down to the local coin store and waiting in line to buy silver because they realize that fiat currencies are no good. QAnon for months has been a strong leading indicator. I don't follow QAnon. A lot of people do, and I don't know. I wish someone can give me a synopsis on QAnon, because I also saw that Jerome Corsi had some type of rift with him. I don't know if I can believe, not because I've seen anything he said, but I don't know if he's believable, not believable. Be very much interested in finding out. Little lap boy of the Illuminati is the alt news gossip. Nick Pear, can't wait for our balance to rebudget itself next year. It's somewhat of a facetious remark, but if you remember the Laffer curve, when you cut taxes, you actually receive more money in taxes because people make more money and you have more economic activity and therefore more taxes get paid. They did reduce the deficit a bit. I think they had a surplus in May. Now, that's not going to, 1 month surplus isn't going to knock down a $20 trillion deficit, but you can make a bit of a dent in it. And something else about the deficit. Silver to the moon. Yeah, true Justin Trudeau's soy boy globalist. As soon as it gets down to $9 an ounce. Well, I don't know. What do we got at the price right now? Silver is 1674. Seems to be stabilized between 1650 and 1750 the last year or so. You really need a catalyst for that to move, and I don't know what that catalyst would be. Gold is stalled, couldn't get past 1360. And now you have a crypto meltdown. What happened today? You look like we got 12% drops in Litecoin, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash. It was somewhat of a bit of a recovery. Yeah, so alternative assets all taking a hit. Silver to the moon. Tom Hanley. Yeah, I haven't been watching Bix Weir's videos in a while. I know in the spring I watched him for when, and Tricky Guy and I used to watch him when he was promoting that silver was the rarest and ready to skyrocket, and there was gold in the Grand Canyon, and therefore silver was better and was rarer and was the Achilles heel and all that. And then he just said, you know what, I've been doing this for 6 years and it's just not going to happen. So cryptos are the way, and then I just stopped watching after that. I watched some of it. I know he's a big fan of Litecoin, but I don't know what he's talking about now. Anyone wants to tell me? Tricky Guy, metals, old hat, ho hum, he, Corso Infowars, now seen as yeah, it's controlled opposition. See, you never know with this stuff. And I never insist that I know, and that's probably a good thing. I know a lot of people do insist that they know, and they get a lot of followers for that because they sound confident like they know. And, you know, we see it in the gold and silver space, prognosticating. They know that this is the story. You know, gold's game changer. This is what's going to send it skyrocketing. Never happened before. Alert, double, triple alert. Well, that doesn't happen, and you never hear. You hear from them again, but you never hear that again. Maybe a couple of years later, they'll start talking again about the COMEX default imminent, and then they'll drop that story, put it on the shelf for a while, and they'll bring it out later. Silver is such a tiny market they can bring it forever. That's true. You know, the silver market. I once did a thing on an analysis of the value of 1 year's worth of silver, and I think it was like $18 billion. And J.P. Morgan had paid $30 billion in fines over the last like 5 or 6 years. It is such a tiny market. You're talking 800 million ounces produced a year. At the price, especially, you know, $16, $17 an ounce, it's not, the amount of trading is very low. In fact, I saw Sharps Pixley decided they're not even going to cover silver anymore. They said there's not enough silver stories for them to cover. It's costing them money, and that there's less interest in silver in the UK because there's a 20% VAT on it. Now, it sounds strange. I mean, Sharp Pixley moaning that they can't afford to run a silver page on their website. I mean, they said they're going to take it down, and they're just going to report on silver opportunistically. I mean, that's their job. They're Sharp's Pixley, I would have thought. Gold to new glory. It's a joke. Don't watch Bix. Well, you know, other than the Grand Canyon stuff, I think, actually, I criticize a lot of the gold and silver pumpers and the Bitcoin pumpers, but you do learn a lot from them. You just have to sift through or realize their bias. It's not like just because somebody's selling silver, they're just making stuff up, or just because somebody wants you to buy a subscription, it's all clickbait. I mean, they have to have some substance behind what they're saying. And so I listen to most of them, but once I realize they're just repeating an old story, or it's just there to drum up interest or business, then, but occasionally you still get some nuggets of wisdom. And I like to hear analysis more than just what I don't like is when people invent scenarios. This is going to happen because this will happen, and when that happens, then gold's going to be in demand, and then people are going to, okay. Everyone can dream. Don't watch Bix. All right. Let's see what's next. Tricky Guy Premium. When you buy under spot, offered when you sell, got to pay the VIG twice. Can't wait for a big score to sell. Got to sell when it's not bad to sell now, and I need the fiat. Well, that's a question for everybody. Do you really believe that you're going to measure your wealth in ounces? I don't know. I mean, most people spend dollars, or you can call it whatever you want, toilet paper, trash. You buy your house in dollars, you put gas in your car in dollars. You may want to protect against depreciation of the dollar, or any currency by precious metals, but unless we're going to move to a different system, I don't see why people will be spending most of us spending something other than dollars. I think it's far-fetched to think that 5 years from now, I mean, 5 years ago, people go, oh, the dollar's dead. We won't be using it anymore. It's toilet paper, gold standard. No. That would be such a dramatic change. And things do happen that are dramatic, but then the question is, after something dramatic happens, is it really going to be, would it be gold or silver or Bitcoin? Who knows? So I'm not betting on that. What I'm hoping for is that the metals and the alternative assets rise in value in fiat terms. As Tricky says, you can cash them out and buy something. I say PM studies should go as far we know. It's a good one. Pounds and get heavy. Dust of Broken. Good to hear from you all the way from the Netherlands. You're still up engraving late into the evening. PM-backed cryptos. I don't see the allure of PM-backed cryptos. You already have ETFs. I mean, what you're doing is you're moving one step beyond the physical, and you're putting it on the blockchain, and you're asking people, okay, well, trust this now because it's not an ETF and it's not JP Morgan who's the custodian, but still, you don't have the physical asset. I think the advantage I never liked the idea of Bitcoin being unbacked. I thought, well, that's just a waste. And I thought it was a joke when they said the best thing about Bitcoin is it's trustless. I said, but it's trustless nothing. There's nothing there. Is that no one can take it. There's no situs. It's not a bug. It's a feature. And I had the hardest time with that somehow someone's going to value something that isn't anything. But given that all fiat currencies aren't anything anyway, and if people want to believe and the market believes that you can buy goods and services with Bitcoin because they're valued, then there is advantage not to having a situs where there's a pile of gold or silver that can be confiscated. So, if they perfect some superconductive graphene compound to replace silver and all that battery and silver, yes. Well, first of all, let's talk about graphene. Now, graphene's expensive, but it's carbon-based. So right now it's a little expensive to use as a substitute. But if silver got really rare or really expensive, the technology exists. They could move over to graphene. Now, silver in solar panels, besides graphene, just putting aside graphene, they're already using less and less silver per panel. It used to be 10, 15 years ago, the silver paste. It required a lot of silver per panel. Now it requires less. There's technology that's using nano silver technology to get the reflections. They're using aluminum. So the idea that solar is the future, and just to extrapolate out, well, let's say we build in the next 5 years 10 times as much solar, and then you take how much silver is used this year, and then you extrapolate it out 10 times. You say, see, there's not enough silver left. It would never happen that way. They would never go to the point where they're making panels and they need that much silver. They would have already, during the 5 years, switched or figured out other ways to do it, or just stop making solar panels because it just doesn't make sense at the price that they have to pay and move into other alternative forms of energy. So invest in lead. Lead, besides being suitable for ammunition, if you look at the lead price, you look at any price, zinc, aluminum, uranium, in the last 5 years, lead has gone, well, since 2015, lead was like 70 cents in a ton, and now it's like $1.22, $1.20, something like that. Zinc now, I used to think that the zinc pennies, I only would try to save the 1982 and before pennies because they were worth like 3 or 4 cents in copper. But the zinc pennies are now worth a lot. The zinc price has gone up. Let's see. Yeah. Zinc was 62 cents in December 2015. It got as high as $1.60. So zinc is now an expensive thing as well. Rob asks, what is stopping central banks from just printing and buying cryptos ad infinitum like they do with other assets? Not that they would make it public. Absolutely nothing. I mean, the Swiss National Bank is 100% upfront about it. They print Swiss francs. They go over to NASDAQ and they buy Apple, Tesla. They have $100 billion worth of U.S. stocks, and as I mentioned, like Tesla, not even just dividend-producing stocks. By the way, did you know that the CME Group, which runs the futures, not just gold and silver, but all of the futures, they have a central bank discount. I did an article on it, and I didn't make it up. It's not one of these fantastical things that I made up. What if they were doing this behind the scenes? No, there's a public document where the CME Group offers central banks a discount to trade futures. Now, when you trade futures and it's like a 15% discount, they actually list the discount per product. But if you're a central bank and you're trading futures, you can impact the price very easily. And with that discount, they're encouraged to trade even more. Keeping your powder dry tricky. PMs are just an asset and inflation protection. That's right. I think what's happened with gold and silver, especially silver, there has been a cult developed around it where you only have integrity if you buy silver. And if you sell your silver, you become a traitor. I mean, that is religion, and I save that for other things. I don't worship silver. I don't worship any asset. They're inert substances. They're not worthy of worship. Even gold, where you have thousands of years of people, in a sense, they worship gold. Very few people ever worship silver. Silver is always pocket change. Rod Panhard. In 1900, someone said, if only they'd invent a faster horse to pull my buggy. That's correct. And you know one thing, tricky guy, that I noticed, Ed, is that when people have a choice whether to do faster or not, even if faster is not as safe, they pick the faster. People go that way. They pick the faster option. So, like with Bitcoin, even though it's, you could make arguments that cars, you don't have a relationship with the car. Some people do like you do with a horse. You can get in an accident, a far worse accident in a car than you can with a horse and buggy. It's damaging to the environment. They make noise, cars. And yet people gladly took all of the downsides of cars and gave up their horses. And at the time, people were saying horses are transportation, period. They've been transportation for 5,000 years. Well, horses today are assets. They're not. In fact, they're liabilities because you got to pay to keep them. But rich people have them and they like them. But people chose the faster asset, and I think that might happen with Bitcoin. It was not my choice. I probably would have been a horse and buggy guy back then, praising horses, give them names and take them for a ride. But people like the idea that you can transact faster with Bitcoin. And yes, you could lose all your money in a hack, but gold sits safely in the safe somewhere, but that's not the same. It's not as fast, so people may choose Bitcoin. Is it true? No. Bitcoin is not already mined. If I can look that up for you right now, Bitcoin is on CoinMarketCap. They have somewhat of an estimate of how much Bitcoin has already been mined. I think it's 21 million in total. They say can be mined. I think we're at about 16, 17 million. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is in its early years, there's people who probably lost a few million. There's estimates that a few million that were lost, when it was worth pennies, and people didn't really care about it. There's that famous story of a Scottish guy. He had it on his computer and he threw it in the waste, the big waste dump, and you see him walking around all crestfallen and say, I lost me Bitcoin. All right, so Bitcoin right now, it's got a market cap of 115 billion. It's got a circulating supply of 17 million. There's a maximum supply of 21 million, so not much further to go, though it gets harder to mine that one last Bitcoin for sure. And that's where, what's his name, McAfee, that's why he claims it's guaranteed, or he'll eat his anatomy by the end of 2020 to be $1 million. I think he's thinking that the last Bitcoin to be mined is going to be very expensive, so you're going to see an acceleration as the Bitcoin runs out. Who knows? Copper and uranium are my form of crypto investment. PM distractors. There is no inflation. Yeah, so what does it work out to? So if it's 17 million out of 21, you have to estimate that. It might be about 81%. Yep, and majority owned by 300 whales. That's right. I've seen those charts where they show, I think if you have like 3 Bitcoin, you're in the top 5%. It's quite ridiculous. But then it really ratchets up from there. Rob Muffin, no inflation in salaries, wages, and tips, everything else, huge amounts of inflation. Everything, Rob, I would say everything that the government is involved in, so if it's housing or education, those are all very expensive. But things like computers, they're not. But the things you need to live are housing, and people need to go to school in order, they think they do, go to college in order to earn a living. But there is much higher. Inflation is, everyone knows, is overstated, is understated on purpose by the government. Physical use of silver, tricky guy. Doesn't matter in the face of global debt that are being so leveraged into the zillion pieces of paper. Isn't the value of silver seen compared to non-physical assets? Well, the value of silver is not, in my opinion, and I think it's a fact, is not based on its physical commodity, but it's based on the paper supply in the futures market. So gold and silver are priced not on how much there is, but on how much investors are willing to pay for it based on the supply of paper contracts. Because as everyone knows, there's never, forget that there's not even in the COMEX vaults amounts to cover the trades, because people don't want to take delivery for the most part. But they actually trade in amounts that are beyond what actually exists on the planet. So clearly the prices of those commodities are not based on the physical amount. I don't know if that answers your question. The Swiss referendum to do away with fractional. Thank you for that update, MK. There was a referendum that suggested they were going to get rid of fractional reserve banking. Well, even beyond that they couldn't even, they could only do, yeah, I guess it was a 1-to-1. You could only loan off of what you had in deposits. Now, that would bring the banking system to a grinding halt because you couldn't do credit creation. And right now, the entire economy runs on credit creation. And in fact, what got the world out of the 2008 financial crisis wasn't a liquidation of debt and a restarting from scratch, but it was the issuance of new credit, led first by the United States and then by China. And China's actually led the world out of the recession since 2009 with massive credit. They haven't stopped. And now you have the ECB and Bank of Japan joining in. So no surprise that that didn't pass, because that would be an initial disaster, even though it makes sense and it's a sound thing to do. Remember, the Swiss also had Save Our Swiss Gold a few years back, and that one was going to require that the Swiss buy back the 60% of their gold that they had sold and basically move over to a gold standard. But initially, that was going to win. It was actually the poll showed it ahead, but then the banks got involved in a real PR campaign, and they tried to make that out to be a disaster. I don't think that would have been even initially a problem, because remember, the Swiss National Bank before 2000, before it joined the IMF, had gold. It had like 2,600 tons of gold on its balance sheet. It wasn't a threat to the financial system when it operated that way, nor would it be if it pulled back and it went back to how it used to be. But the banks made it sound like, just like Brexit, it'd be a disaster. Trump gets elected, that would be a disaster. You hear this kind of stuff all the time. KLR Ryder, 1 million Bitcoin in Satoshi wallet. What if that got dumped? Well, sure, anytime you have one holder, and if he or she decides to dump, but usually one holder has a financial incentive not to dump all at once and to get the best prices. That's why we all marvel at the late night raids on COMEX where someone sells $1 billion worth of gold in like a second. No one would ever do that. There's no point in doing that other than you want to drive the price down. So I also don't know if you could, the way Bitcoin is still, it is decentralized. And I'm not talking about decentralized exchanges. I'm just talking about there's hundreds of exchanges. I don't know if you could. You'd have to open up wallets, and not just wallets. You'd have to open up accounts on all the different exchanges across the globe to try to dump that much. You just couldn't do it the way you can. COMEX is set up to dump billions in notional amount. You really can't dump 1 million Bitcoin. You certainly couldn't do it on Coinbase. I mean, you'd have to do Coinbase, Polynex. You'd have to go all over the world to do it. It'd be a big deal. Satoshi does not exist. Who knows? Rob Muffett. Rule 1, everyone wants something for nothing. Rule 2, everybody wants to escape the consequences of their bad decision. That is definitely true. Someone has the keys to that wallet. That's true. And the question is whether that person is holding them, will sell them. But, at some point, KLR writer, if there's a big market for Bitcoin, it could absorb those 1 million coins. Not right now, but it's possible that it could. If it was dumped, the price would drop, but why would one dump it on an exchange? Yeah, that doesn't make much sense. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining. Unless you have any final comments. Looking forward this week, I still have to get out the Shanghai Gold Exchange numbers. They're pretty good. So it shows that there's still robust physical demand in China, although the Indian numbers for imports are not as good, haven't been all year. And we're going to have the IG report coming out, and also Trump will be talking to Rocket Man, so we'll see how that goes. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you again. Tomorrow night, we do this every night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and for our European friends, I'm going to try to do something a little earlier. Thank you very much. Let's see.